A guy at the bar at the barbecue joint last night asked me, hey, at the Mid-South, are you going for a good time? Now, however you understand that question, the answer, of course, is yes. Is a gravel race a party? Is a party a gravel race? Well, it depends on where you are. At the pointy end of the race, winners Lauren Dickershinzo and Torbjorn Andre Rode, they were here to race. There may well be some partying going on this evening. And then, towards the very other end of the race, there is the DFL, the dead effing last party for the last finisher across the line, and there's a party for everyone in between. Bobby Wintle, race director, owner of District Bicycles and master of Stoke, keeps the party going, whether he is on stage, following the marching band through the throngs of riders at the start, or standing in the end zone of the finishing chute, where he gives each and every single finisher a big old Bobby Wintle hug. For this particular gravel race party, my steed on test was the Salsa Warbird, an OG gravel race bike. Does a gravel race bike have 46 centimeter bars? Well, this one does. In this video, I'll give you my thoughts on this bike, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, with the Mid-South as context. If you haven't already, please take a second to subscribe. Now kick back and let's take a ride through the clay roads outside Stillwater, Oklahoma. As with real estate, with gravel racing, it's all about three things: location, location, and location. Here in Stillwater, it's all about this red clay. When dry, the clay roads make for some beautiful photos, and when wet, they make for some epic racing, as this surface turned into a quick creep peanut butter mud sloppy mix. In fact, the last time I rode a Warbird was here at the COVID edition of the Mid-South, aka the Mud South in 2020, where I appreciated the ample tire clearance on that bike. This year, it was not a Mud South, it was a fair South. Although the road conditions in places were sort of like the aftermath of some muddy days, where some deep ruts caused by vehicles driving through muddy roads had solidified and made for some dangerous conditions. I was sorry to see a number of folks go down as people were jumping ruts they could or couldn't see, and sometimes taking themselves out, sometimes taking others out. It's one of the sticky wickets we find ourselves in with gravel racing. Is, part of the beauty of the thing is we can all get in together, but that can also be a little bit dangerous when you've got Olympians like Flavia Oliveira and BMX Hall of Famers champions Jamie Bestwick getting taken out by people who perhaps don't share their bike handling skills. But in any event, that adds to the texture and ever-changing nature of gravel racing in general, and this race in particular. Original Salsa Warbird was launched in 2012, and Salsa's thinking at the time and to this day was that having a bit of give at the back end and a little bit of stability up front is a good thing, because what makes a fast bike on smooth tarmac and what makes a fast bike when you're wrestling through muddy or dry ruts are two very different things. This bike, I learned today from my pal Spencer Pallison, is a cowboy bike. Why is that? Well, because it's bow-legged. Salsa claims that its Class 5 VRS seat stays absorb some of the damage coming up at you from the road by bulging out. That may be the case. I'll push on this, see if you can see any flexing, but I know for certain that having a carbon post with some flex to it does a lot of the heavy lifting, or the heavy carrying, the heavy load carrying in this case. I switched the saddle out from the original WTB SL8 in part because there was so much cushion on that. I wanted to have a firmer perch just to be able to get a better feel for what was happening here and here, as opposed to a bunch of give at the saddle. This is the Gravelier saddle. Everything is a gravel thing these days. This is a little bit shorter, snub nose, Specialized Power-esque. I found it to be a relatively comfortable perch, a little bit skinnier that perhaps my wide load would prefer, but I would happily ride this again. But in any event, let's see how much we can see moving here. I did some filming over washboard trying to see if I could detect any movement. It's really hard to see, and like what you can measure in a lab and what you can feel out on the roads, two very different things, right? Like you can measure the difference in tires rolling resistance and different, aerodynamic drag, and those are actual differences for sure. But what you can feel as a rider, I don't know. What I can feel, as I said, is movement from the post for sure. That's moving, right? Is this moving? I don't know, but it's certainly not hurting things, and having mud clearance for days is a positive thing. Up front it's a 70.75, so a bit on the slacker end. This is a size 57, so it's a 57 and change top tube, 57.5 I want to say, with a relatively stubby stem. Up front, this is where I take issue with this being a race bike, because it's, I felt like I was a Jesus statue welcoming the children riding around with these bars. I took a snap at the race finish with Dylan Johnson, whose bars were probably like half the width here. Obviously, what is an appropriate size depends on your own physiology and your own preferences, but for me, a bar that's 46 center at the hoods and then flares way out, it just feels gargantuan. But obviously it's not an integrated thing, so you can swap that out. It felt a bit stiff, especially compared to how plush and cush the back end is. But again, the biggest beef I have is the wide stance of the bar. Now this video, like all my videos in 2024, are supported by 6 annual sponsors who I very much appreciate. In addition to supporting me, financially, I also appreciate how these folks help me out. For instance, here at the Mid-South, Travis handed me some sweet cages to hold these tall boys, and then the talented Richard Poole rode with me, a good 5-10 miles out to do a photo shoot after he had worked the expo all day. So thanks very much to my sponsors who allow me to do this. Please check them out at the links in the description. There are a couple discount codes so you can get some of their sweet goodies at a savings. Other bits, Garmin Vector Power Meter pedals. I did a video about a year ago comparing these against the SRM X Power. I said I like the X Power better, although I'd prefer to have either a crank-based or a spider-based power meter and then just normal pedals. I've got these just because the X Power charger cable's first one, then the second crapped out, and that underscores one of the problems with those pedals. So on these guys, they're squeaking, still giving me a bit of feedback, but power measurement is fine, and even though the stack is a little bit taller, they're fine. So still feel the same about these that I did a year ago, and they're okay, but if you've got a choice, just get a power meter that goes on the crank, like a Stages or a 4i, or one that goes on the Spider, like with the SRAM group. They make the excellent Quark that's integrated. Leads me to one of a couple things I'd love to see on this bike is an integrated power meter that comes on the bike. The models on this run from like $2,200 up to $7,700. This is like the second one down, so it's like $6,000 plus. I feel like for a gravel race bike, it should have a power meter built in, which is obviously something SRAM makes. Something SRAM doesn't make, but I'm sure they could, is some buttons to drive your head unit, whether it's a Wahoo or a Garmin. For gravel racing, when you're trying not to crash yourself or the 2,000 buddies behind you, being able to toggle between screens from the levers is a good thing. That's something that I love about the Shimano GRX Di2. So that's something I'd love to see in the future from SRAM. Another thing I'd like to see on this bike would be some carbon hoops. Again, for the price point, carbon, switching from metal, these are WTBs, they're fine wheels, but switching from metal to carbon is absolutely something you could feel, a la a big flexing carbon post. What I feel in making that jump is just the reduction in rotational weight. Substantially lighter feels substantially better. Rubber, 42 mil Terravale Cannonball. I've only run 35s here and semi-slicks here, like a Vittoria Torino Dryer, Vittoria Torino Zero. So this is a chunkier tire. I didn't do it because I'm one of the cool kids and going wider is on trend. I did it because this is what came on the bike that I pulled out of the box a few days ago. Combined with the wheels, it felt a little bit slower than like a Gucci setup. Maybe that's just because I'm getting progressively slower. You know, the first time I did this race, I was 11th, and the next year I did it, I was 12th, and then I was like 30 something, and today I was like 70 something. So maybe that's just me blaming my old slow self on the setup. But you know, having not taken this into a laboratory, it just felt a little bit slower than a lighter, smoother tread setup. We're expecting the clay, we're expecting the ruts, we're expecting the creek crossing. One thing I was not expecting was an ample amount of sand that had been laid down on a few of the roads. That had us in the ditch a few times. Apologies to whoever happened to be behind me the few times I've swerved and had a foot out trying to keep it upright. It certainly adds to the fun of gravel racing, is the surface is always changing. Some folks on the front end will go and scout critical portions. You know, that's certainly something I recommend doing if you're taking it seriously. It can also just be a fun thing to see what the day holds. Okay, fun when you're in a small group and you can see what's coming. Not so fun at the early part of the day when you can't see anything except helmets banging around in front of you. It is nice to know where your buddies are. In particular, my man Logan Von Bokel in the feed zone this year. Yep. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
Passing out the tall bottles. Often I'll run the Usui pack. This year, since I had the GoPro chesty on, I went with just the big boys. Since it was overcast for most of the day, was able to get through the day with 3 of these big tall boys held securely with these schwanky new, to me, Silka tie cages. As I mentioned, this bike comes in a number of builds. This particular one is the SRAM wide force axis setup. So you've got a 2x, a 4330 with a 1036 in the back. That was enough on both ends. I'm sure the fast folks at the front would have found that 4310 top gear too small. For my needs, that was enough. For all-around riding, I'd probably prefer to see it a little bit bigger. But again, SRAM has a whole host of gearing options, both up front and the back. 1x configuration, 2x configuration, and in that aspect, it is superior to Shimano in terms of being able to dial in your gearing for your preferences and where you live. Also, the front derailleur shifted well, going from the big to the small on some of these mini kickers. Certainly was not the case with early SRAM front derailleurs. Here, again, going from a 43 down to a 30. It's a little bit slow, but reliable, and reliable is what you want in a bicycle race or anytime you're riding a bicycle. So all in all, Salsa Warbird remains a quality and comfortable gravel bike. Do 46 bars a gravel race bar make? I would argue not. And how much of a difference do shallow wheels versus aero wheels make for gravel? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to go to the wind tunnel in Indianapolis with the fine folks at Silka and a certain Dylan Johnson. We're going to test out a few things. One thing I'm going to test out is how much you can save, or I can save, by going narrower with handlebars, and compare that to how much you can save by going from shallow wheels to deeper wheels. Do you know the answer? I don't. We'll go find out. So if you have not already, please subscribe. And in a couple videos, we will be checking back in with the answer to that question. So that's it from me from the Mid-South. Thanks for watching. And for those of you who are out here today taking pulls, saying hello, I appreciate that. That helped me today to enjoy the ride.